if this works. Hopefully it does. What are the chances? Looks like we're good. Is there a massive delay? Oh wow, that just jumped ahead. Okay, cool. Hello, hello, hello. See, some of you are already here. Yada, yada, yada. Bring that up. Okay, cool. How's it going, y'all? Good to see ya. Let's leave that, actually. So I was thinking today, we've got the game, right? The game works. I think we didn't show off all the collision and stuff working last week, so let me get the camera zoomed in a little bit so that we can see it a little better. Where is my camera? There's my camera. So I've got the scaling mode right now set to a fixed vertical for 1280. I'm just going to bump that up to something else, I think. Let's call it, I don't know, let's do half the height it was. Then when we run this, it should show up much bigger. And I'm kind of just doing that to be able to keep it in a smaller window. Ooh, I need to turn that laptop down. So this is the game right now. We've got a couple of character movements in 8 directions. We've got all the collision working this week. So of the work that we were working on last week, we did end up figuring everything out. All of the collision here works. The Z indexing for the level is fixed completely. The Z indexing for the player still needs a little bit of debugging. That'll be a debugging process inside a Bevy ECS tile map. For the Y sorting, basically the idea is that the player should be able to, and I've put names on a lot more stuff too. So if we go to Bevy Inspector eGUI and we go down to Transform, and I move the Z index up and down, you can see that the character goes either in front of or behind this fence. That is the goal. It should be able to do that automatically based on where it is. That does not currently work, but everything for all of the levels itself does work. So all the layering that we see in tiled when we're doing our like map design or whatever, all of these levels are, or all of these layers are in the right order all the time, every time now. Is this running on Mac? Yeah, I do most of my development on Mac. I have a Windows PC. I can access a Linux install if I need to. But in general, I tend to work on a Mac. Hey Miner, hey Steve, hey Xavier. Hello Hleb. So yeah, we've got a level working. I was thinking today we would do something with like one of these boxes. So one of the interesting things that I started doing in the tile set, if I find maybe the box here. Let's see. If we go to the box, we've got clearly a collider at the bottom of the box here. So this is a tiled level editor. And this is the tile sheet we're using, which is just a prototype. So it's just demo art effectively. Actually, this one doesn't have what I was looking for on it. There we go. So on the tile and on the collider, we can add custom properties inside of tiled. So I've started adding this name property, and I wrote explicit support for that inside of the tiled integration for Bevy that we're using. So when we have a name property on one of these tiles, then we should be able to go into the world inspector and look for crate, and it shows up right here with crate. which is wonderful because it makes it a lot easier to look for things. So we only have one crate in the scene, so only one shows up. Let's make the code a little bit bigger. So that's a super simple implementation in terms of like what it's actually doing. So when we spawn in any given tile or any collider or whatever, if there is a name, then we add the name. So this is for a tile map layer. This is looking into the tile set, getting the tile by ID, and then checking to see if it has a custom name property, which is kind of messy. But this is the way we have to do it because tile doesn't have any kind of like types in it. We end up with these things that are like property value enums, which if I do autocomplete here, yeah, if I do autocomplete here, you see that it's like bool value, which is a wrapper enum, and color value, and file value, and float value, and whatever. So like right now I'm just kind of using strings for a lot of things, but it'll insert this name component if there is one inside of tiled, which is really nice. And then there was the, I'm doing this for another property that I can't remember the name of. Yeah, sensors. So we have the plate here that you're supposed to be able to walk over. And you can see there's a collider here if you're looking at it close enough. So there's a collider on this plate. I've labeled it as a sensor so we can walk over this, because when things are labeled as a sensor inside of tiled, where's the plates? There's the plates. So this is switch plate inactive. And if we click on the collider, you can see that this is a checkbox. So it's a Boolean, yes or no. And when that's set, this becomes a sensor because we're inserting the sensor component. So there's just some nice integration with the editor. How am I planning to change if the character shows in front of the door picture or behind? There is a very specific place that I'm looking to do that. Let's see if I can find it, actually. I can show it to you. Do I have a Chrome window somewhere? Yes, I do. We'll steal the Chrome window from my WGPU experiments. So if I do Bevy, or this is stars repo. So we go to stars repo. I think inside of render, let's just search for it. Y sort, I think, is the right thing to look for. So in this file, at this exact point, there is a if chunk y sort do this translation for the z value. So this is setting the z value for the transform. And when you do something that is y sorted, which we do have y sort set to true for our tile map, it's supposed to use this as the algorithm for determining what the z value of the tile is, or the z value of the chunk, actually. But our chunks are single tiles, so same thing for us. Otherwise, it's supposed to just use the z value, whatever. And for some reason, I think this is locking to whole numbers or something like that. So this specific piece of code needs to get a fix, I believe, or we need to work around it somehow. And when that happens, all we'll need to do is, when the character moves up and down, we'll add the y value to the z index. So basically the way that that will end up working, at least in my head, is we have a couple of layers in our tile editor that are considered like bottom layers, things the player is always above. This includes this like white floor. These raised floors are something that the player needs to always be above. And then there's this switches layer. And this switches layer is something that is included with the bottom three. But then we get to the player layer. And the player layer includes things that you can walk in front of and behind, which includes the door, the crate, some of these stairs. Because if you're standing up here, then you need to be behind them. If you're standing here, you should be on them. That kind of stuff. And then I didn't do the upper floor. It's just kind of sitting there. But basically the idea is there's a set of layers that are going to be definitely below the player, a set of layers that are definitely going to be above the player, and then like a range of items that the player is going to be able to go in front of and behind. I do think that we run into trouble no matter what with things that look like this. So where's our poles? Here's our poles, right? This is one tile. And I think we run into an issue here because the center of the tile, or no matter which coordinate you use, basically, one of these poles is going to be in the wrong spot, right? So if you're standing right in the middle of this tile, and let's say you use like the bottom as the tile origin or whatever, anchor, you end up with a situation where you're in front of certain poles and behind other poles, and it's not necessarily correct. So I think this actual tile doesn't work unless it's just background decoration. But TBD. We do have individual poles. So one of the things that we can use to get around that is if we go to like, I don't know, up here, and I place individual poles like this, then we can be above or below different things, and we can set different anchors, I believe, and stuff like that. So TBD, I'm not sold on this tile size either yet. I don't know if this is going to be the tile size that I use for the game. I'm just kind of getting things to work. Is there any schedule of your streams? Yes, every Saturday morning at this time. And currently we're working on this game specifically. So it will be a 2D isometric game with Bevy every Saturday morning. Kind of like Saturday morning cartoons in my head. I haven't done some of the other tiles. So like, for example, I haven't thought about what happens if we do something like this up in the corner. And one thing that we do need to do is if you walk behind something like one of these walls, we actually need to make this tile like transparent, right? And that's something that actually I didn't even write down yet. So why don't I write that down? We'll get the screenshot. I will do the IV repo. IV repo is not open source at the moment, just because I'm stuffing a bunch of stuff into it. Didn't really want to worry about it. Transparentize walls in front of player. Submit. Not the best issue, but how does the asset pack limit what you can do? The asset pack is like a prototype asset pack, right? Like the asset pack is not something that I'm planning on using long term. So given the way the tiles are designed and the way that we're building our tile map, we will have to actually evaluate whether a certain tile is something that we want specifically or something that we don't. And I think that's not necessarily, you're saying I figured mixing Blender assets and a Kenny asset pack would be difficult. I actually don't think that's the case here. The issue isn't the Blender asset pack and like a Kenny asset pack or something. This is by nature the idea that we have something on top of the tile map and we need to Y sort the player in addition to the tiles. So it could be anything. It could be a capsule. It could be whatever. But this is not the character we're going to end up using in the end. And this is not the level we're going to end up using in the end. I'm going to actually do art for this. I'm using the prototype level as a block out and as a test for like the tiled integration. Am I sold on the camera being at exactly 45 degrees? This makes the bottom and top tile poles align perfectly and confuse your rotten brain. I don't think that this is how these poles are going to look at all. If we were going to have something like this, we would have an offset for a layer above. So you can see how these poles specifically are, man, I never know which window I'm in tiled. Let's click in here. Okay, so you can see how these 4 poles are like overlapping with the other tiles, right? So obviously it would overlap the one right next to it, right? But it also overlaps like way up here. What that says to me is that we need actually a second layer that is offset by some amount. And these 4 poles would be, they would have a cap on them. They would have like a next level on them, like an upper layer on that offset layer. So it wouldn't look exactly like this. But yes, I think this like 4 pole construction is not necessarily my favorite tile in the pack. How many days does it take to learn? I like game development. I don't have an answer to that because I don't know what kind of game you want to make. There are people who make games that don't know any programming. There are people who make games that learn an entire programming language. And obviously those two things take vastly different amounts of time. So I'm sold on the isometric perspective is what I would say, Xavier. I don't know that I'm sold on these tiles specifically. I'm not sold on... Also, it's not exactly 45 degrees, is worth noting. The actual aspect ratio is like 2:1. Which I think in Blender turns out to be like 56 point something degrees by like something else. It's something weird. It's not exactly a perfect isometric. The aspect yes, we literally talked about Y sorting. I don't know if you were here for that. Found your channel 2 weeks ago. Started an isometric game with Bevy as well. Cool. Figure that for this kind of problem, I would use a 3D camera with orthographic perspective. If you're going to use a 3D camera, then you're doing a 3D game. I'm doing a 2D game. This is all sprites. This is not a 3D game. It's supposed to look like it's vaguely 3D. But even... I don't know if I have a screenshot of it, but even if you look at the like very production ready, I don't think I have an example of it. But even if you look at like Hades, it doesn't work perfectly, right? It is inaccurate in very specific ways. And it turns out that that largely does not matter. This collider is in the wrong spot and it's bugging me. Where's our tiles? Oh, right. It's because I couldn't see the edge when I built it. That's so strange. So I have to draw the collider without seeing the edge tile. Okay, fine. I don't care enough. We're probably not going to use that four post tile anyway. God, I really wish it was easier to tell how to navigate around tiled. But yeah, so you can see how we don't have the little walls up here that I placed earlier. Actually, that's because I didn't export the map, now that I'm thinking about it. So I was thinking today we'd do some interaction with various elements, specifically like opening chests and stuff. So like you can see how like this works more or less, except for the fact that like it doesn't work on certain angles. But yeah, the Y sorting needs to be implemented for the player, which currently, it's not doing it dynamically currently, but even in my manual tests, it hasn't exactly worked yet. So I need to debug what's actually happening with the individual tiles first. Watch 5 hours a day, 2 years watching YouTube videos nonstop. That'll teach you game dev. Isn't that what people refer to as tutorial hell? Okay, so we have options. Basically, we could do this sensor or we could do this crate. I was thinking the crate today, but we might be able to pull both off. So basically, when you stand on this switch, I want to be able to fire an event or something. And I also want to switch the visual so that when you stand on the plate, it gets depressed or pressed. I guess pressed and depressed are the same word, which is always awkward. So if I go to the tile map, and I go to this, this is our like tile, right? And then we need it to look like this one when you're standing on it. So how do we do that? Since the Blender character has 8 angles of running, do you have to code the angles in Rust? Yeah, more or less. The character controller that we have is somewhere in here. Animation, maybe. Yeah, so it's kind of hard-coded right now. I'm planning on making this a little bit more generic. That's also why I have the Blender stuff up here. So I have this script that basically renders out different animations. And then those each have a number of frames, and I specify those based on frame rate and whatnot. And I basically have this little calculation that's like always keeping track of where the character is facing. And it's just like an enum. In this case, it's actually out of order, so I have to do this weird match thing. But you can ignore that. That's just matching like 0 isn't 0. 0 is like 4 instead of 0. Which is, you know, my fault. Your creativity is awesome. Thanks for this week in Bevy and tutorials. Yeah, of course. I'm glad you're enjoying the weekly Bevy stuff. Window manager is Yabai. Yabai. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I think it's actually a real word that I don't know how to pronounce. But yeah, so the animation is controlled by the systems that are running effectively. So we always know which direction we're facing. And I just use that facing variable whenever I'm deciding what to do. And then I have these little like structs that I actually am going to bring this out into like a separate animation component, because it's the same thing over and over and over. But this is like a timer, a number of frames, or the current frame we're at, and like the total number of frames that are in the animation. And the systems that run on these will just increase that based on how much time has passed. So it allows me to use any arbitrary set of frames, which is pretty cool. You tried Amethyst but wasn't a huge fan. Yeah, I like Yabai for the binary space partitioning. Like whenever I open a new window, it just like goes somewhere. Obviously it messed up exactly when I did that, because why wouldn't it? Dangerous / risky. I don't know what you're referring to with that. So I'm thinking that this tile, since we're working inside of the tile map, probably needs to know the index of this other like paired tile with it. Actually, also the other thing, there's switches in here, which I actually didn't know until very, very recently. So let's put a switch in here too. This is going to be, I don't know, here. So that's an off switch. And then do we have an on switch? I think we do have an on switch. Okay, cool. So we'll put a switch there. We'll switch that on at some point. I'm basically going to code an interaction. Since each tile is an entity, can you add an animation to it? Absolutely, you can. 100%. That is actually an intended behavior. I think I actually can just go to the docs. I think this will show on the docs. Not LDK. Damn. Docs.rs/Bevy ECS tile map. And there's something in here called animated tile that I actually haven't looked into at all yet. But this will do a GPU accelerated version of an animated texture atlas for the tile. So start frame, end frame, speed of the animation. This is literally for like an animation that you want to play. I don't know that there's much control over how this works. So I'm thinking that this animated tile is more for like waving grass or stuff like that. We can definitely interact with individual tiles though. So if we want to do something more custom where like you need to do a series of 3 button presses and it puts the tile into a different state each time, we can totally do that. That's totally possible. Okay, so I need this index referenced from here. How am I going to do that? What am I going to do for it? I think we're going to add an extra component here. So I think we're going to do this with a custom property. I don't love that, but it'll work. So let's do it. This will be an int. It'll be, alternate state maybe. And it'll be the index offset of the tile ID. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can just do 4. I don't know that that's a good idea. This feels a little bit awkward and weird to me. But it'll let me access this definitively. So I know it'll work. Do you plan to do a 3D game in the future? Yes, I do. I was talking about that last night with my friend Prince, actually. I think if I'm going to do a 3D game, well, I'm not going to commit to anything just yet. But yes, I am planning at some point to do 3D stuff. Okay. So we've got this alternate state. I don't love that, but we can make it work. So let's go down to, this is in colliders. So we probably want this on tile. So let's find where I've done the other name stuff, which is on the tile. That's this right here. So basically, the thing that we're going to do is we just put a custom property in, and this is how you access the custom properties, which is awful. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like this. Let's just get this somewhere over here like this. But the idea is basically we're going to do this pattern again. And we're going to have to get the alternate, what did I call it? I already forgot. That's how bad that's going to be. Alternate state. I guess. Yeah, okay. I'm going to continue with this. I know it's not great. I know it's not exactly what I want. But it is what I'm going to start with. I'm going to keep going because I know it'll work. So this is going to be like an index offset, right? So maybe instead of index offset, we do atlas index offset. And then this won't be name, this will be alt tile, I guess. And we'll insert some component here named alternate state. And this will hold, I'm going to make this a struct because otherwise I am going to forget which index this uses, or like what number this is. So I'm going to put alt tile here. We don't have this component yet, so we need to create it. So I'm going to bring this up somewhere way above this. Probably up here. This is all the tile-based reader stuff. I do feel like I'm getting a little bit into the weeds of the tile map here for what needs to be inside of this plugin and what doesn't. So at some point I'll want to refactor this, but that's not today. So let's make this a U size. Actually, it's an offset, so it has to be like an I32. Tiled integration into Bevy ECS tile map needs some work, love. Yes, the tiled integration that I am using is basically some of the stuff that they had in the repo, and then I went in and modified a bunch of stuff. So this is now my own little Bevy ECS tiled thing. I don't really plan on maintaining it as a separate crate for wider use. Although in the future, maybe I could be convinced to do that or put the code up somewhere or something. For now, I'm just doing it as something I need for this project specifically. But it would be useful for somebody to have a tiled integration. So component, atlas index offset. So alt tile, and then alt tile is not going to be an I32, right? Oh, it is an I32. Why? It's a reference to an I32. Sick. So we'll just dereference that. Why is that an issue? Okay, we can dereference that there because it'll copy the number, store it into this option, and then we can just use it here. Because integers are copy. 2C isometric is great because it can run on a potato. Too much vector calculation in 3D. Yeah, so one of the reasons that I'm doing this style is because I started playing Hades at the recommendation of my friend Prince, and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the art style and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And I started doing some like test work to like basically start a video series re-implementing mechanics from popular games. And I just put too many demos together, and then it started to look like an actual game. So now I guess I'm building a game. Okay, so we've got this component now. We do have to do sensing, and then we have to change the index, right? So these will be public. I guess this could be inside of the Bevy ECS tiled stuff, but I'm gonna make it, let's make this a different file, actually, now that I think about it. Let's keep it separate from like the regular tile map building stuff. Let's do pub mod, I don't know, what do we call this? Alternate tiles? Tile switches. Let's call this switches. So create the file. Don't mess everything up while I'm doing that. Switches. So now we've got this. We need to bring in, we don't need to bring in the Bevy prelude. I'm just doing that because it's easy. So we have this. We need a system. Is there any engine to work with Bevy in the near future? I don't know what that means. Could you rephrase the question? Is there any engine to work with Bevy in the near future? Okay, so we have this alternate state. We need to be able to basically, when the sensor triggers, switch. So maybe we start with triggering the sensor. I feel like that might be a little bit more straightforward. Let's use switches star here so that we can just use that. Bevy XPBD sensor. I think sensor is just going to be collisions, right? XPBD2D sensor. Right, so we've got a collider. They send collision events and register intersections, but allow other bodies to pass through them. So we can do a system that looks for anything that is the player that is in the colliding entities with the sensor. They do fire events, so we could read the events immediately. But I think we want to know like when it leaves as well. So I think we want to do colliding entities. So I think our query is going to look something like this specifically. And then we're going to check colliding entities to see if the player is in it. And then the switch will react to that. Yeah, Bevy doesn't currently have an editor. It's supposed to... So one of the qualifications for Bevy doing a 1.0 at some point is to have an editor. Just to be clear. Like, people are working on this. It doesn't currently exist. You basically have to program or use a separate level editor or something like that to use it today. Okay, so let's do sensors in the main project. And let's do pubmod sensors, I guess. So I could make this super generic, right? Like alternate state sensors. And then this could query for any entity that has colliding entities and also with sensor. I don't think sensor holds any state. Let's check to make sure. Oh, I already have sensor open. I don't think sensor has any state. It's just a marker component. So we can't actually do anything useful with like a query for sensor. Bevy prelude star and use Bevy XPBD 2D prelude star. And then that's mostly fine. So colliding entities and sensor. We need this to have alternate state. I think alternate state should probably have current state. Now that I think about it. So we'll go into switches and we'll do I want to make this an enum. I'm going to make this an active state. Enum active state. We could have made it a Boolean. I don't like Booleans for this. So active and inactive makes it very clear whether the switch should be on or off. And then this also needs to be pub because we're actually going to use it. Bevy ECS tiled map is giving me an issue for some reason, so we'll do a cargo check. An entity with a sensor and two children, when sensor is off, a children is visible. When sensor is on, child B is visible. It's not a terrible idea. I think that because we can access the tiles individually, that we can do tile-based index changes, which makes more sense in this case. We are using children for the colliders, so children of the tiles are the colliders. So we can have multiple colliders, which means that we also have multiple possibilities of having multiple children. So if the tile child has colliders as children, and then also has like image bundles or something as children, then we have like, even though there are only two different kinds of tile, we're going to have, 3 or 5 children. So children isn't quite reliable in that sense because it's index based. So I would prefer to do something a little bit more component based. So let's do a cargo check here. Because I feel like I have something wrong inside of this file. Alternative state. Oh, right, because I'd never updated this. And this is going to be current state, and the default is going to be inactive. We do sensors. This needs to be a mutable query for alternate state. This is going to be colliding entities and state, and this is going to be, I go back and forth on whether to put query in these like variable names or not. Query, we need a query for like with player, and I think we only need the entity. So we have the player query. We are only ever going to have one player. So let's do let. I think it's going to be a result, if I remember correctly. So let player entity equals query player dot single, or get single maybe. Get single. And this is going to be a return if we don't have it, and we'll warn no player available. I have done something wrong that I can't tell offhand. Is it the semicolon? No. I have messed up my, else. That makes sense. So we've got our player entity. We can iterate over colliding entities with an alternate state. So this will iterate over all sensors effectively, which I think is what we want. Needs an else. Yes, absolutely. I lowered the latency today, so it should be a little bit faster. To lower it any more for the stream, I would have to lower it to 1080p. So I can do that if y'all want me to. Right now I'm streaming at 1440, if I remember correctly. But I have to go down to 1080p to get it to ultra low latency, which I can totally do if you would all prefer that. This is the only spot I think Swift has Rust beat parameter aliases and function signatures that let you provide external context while also keeping internals named sensibly otherwise. I don't know that I know enough Swift to know exactly what you're talking about. I have written some like basic Swift before, but I don't know it well as a language. Can you change the image layer when the character walks past an angle on the boundary you drew. Yeah, effectively that's what we're doing. This is good for small phone screens? Okay, cool. Oh, I wouldn't lower the size of anything. It would just be the pixel resolution, Steve. The size would stay the same. Like the text and stuff would still be just as big. Okay, so we've got colliding entities and state. Where was I? We have the colliding entities. We need to see if the colliding entities for a given sensor, let's name this sensors, because that seems to make sense since we have multiple queries. Query sensors, let's get rid of this. Colliding entities. I think this has like a get on it or something like that. I don't remember exactly how this struct is set up, and it's not just a hash map. Yeah, so it's a hash set inside of it. I think that we just access the hash set and check. So colliding entities like .0 . I can never remember. Contains is the right thing. Player entity. Does this? Oh yeah, added reference here. That makes sense. So let's do info player on blank switch. And then this will be state, and state will have to have a debug on it, so I'll go add that. Actually, both of these are going to have debug on them. Drive debug. Debug. And this is going to have to be a debug formatter. That's what this little question mark inside of it with the colon means. Otherwise, it's the display formatter, which is just a 2-string. Keep the resolution 1400. Chat latency doesn't matter at this point. It's good. Okay, cool. I think it was really bad last week. Because I had somehow left it set to like full latency last week, which was just too much. It was too much latency. Can Bevy be used for mobile game dev? Yes, it absolutely can. There's a couple that have come out recently. One of them is Zulitaire is currently on iOS. This is a puzzle game. It's in the iOS App Store. I think it got approved and it's all good now. There's also, I have the game on my phone. I don't remember exactly what it's called. Voltrum. There's this game. This is Bevy, like drop game. This I was at a conference in London giving a talk, and they released Voltum that week, and I was able to just play this while I was listening to talks, and it was absolutely wonderful. Highly suggest. It is exactly what it looks like. It is a drop match game. So if you like that, it's fine. It's good. It's good. There is currently an issue regarding crashing on Android. I believe that's because of a WinIt dependency. Something changed there. They are trying to get that fix in for 0.14, which is coming out very, very, very soon. Like, I don't want to commit them to any kind of date, so I'm not going to say anything. But it is the 0.14 release process has started, and the Android stuff should get fixed at some point. Cool. Back to sensors. Query sensors. I don't think the player doesn't need to be mute, so that's fine. Query sensors, we're not currently iterating mutably, but we will. State is going to be mutable. So let's run this and see if I got my code right, because I don't remember if I finished or not. Just bought it, Voltum. Nice. or Zulitaire. I don't remember which one we were talking about. I found Voltum pretty fun though. And it helped me, like, I have ADHD, so like when I'm listening to talks and stuff, I need to do something with my hands. And it was really nice for that. Okay, so I think that the collider on the player is a child of the player, and that's causing us an issue right now. So what do we do for that? Because I think this player entity, we actually need the child collider. If we go to main, we spawn the player in here. This collider is what we need. I don't love what I'm about to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. We're going to call this player collider. Sorry for anybody that likes being or writing correct code or good code. Where did I define this player component? In player, maybe? Yeah, cool. A marker component to identify the player entity's collider for sensor switch purposes. I'm going to add a to-do here. Am I going to add a to-do here? Don't love that the player collider is a child of the player. Try to reevaluate at some point. One of the things that I did is I switched on the cargo clippy lint project-wide for warning about not writing docs for things. So now anything that's yellow is probably because there isn't docs, which is great in my opinion. So now back in sensors then, we don't really want player, we want player sensor or player collider, right? Oh, you know what? The system isn't even running. I bet you one of you knew that already. Okay. Let's just write a quick plugin here and do it that way. Sensor plugin, impl sensor plugin, not impl sensor plugin. What am I doing? Impl plugin for sensor plugin. Missing members. App.add systems. Probably just update for now. And then sensor plugin needs to be public. And we need to use it. Hello, I'm getting older, so thought it could be a good idea to learn Rust. Then I landed in your videos with Bevy. Now I want to do a game. I'm already doing a design game document reading theory. Sick. Yeah. I mean, if you're just getting started doing game development, the thing that I would suggest you do is make a lot of small games, like way smaller than you think is like appropriate, or like you probably want your first game to be something like, you know, Pong or even Snake or 2048 or, you know, something very small. Because the goal is to then roll that into the next one and like finish one, finish the next, finish the next, finish the next. One of the things that a lot of people fall into when they're doing game development is working on the same game for like 5 years and then never shipping it. And that's just kind of like it's fine if you're just doing it as a side thing and for fun and you don't actually want to ship. But if you're doing a game design document, it sounds like you want to ship a game. So I would suggest shipping smaller things and then building your way up to bigger games. At this point, might as well turn on Clippy Pedantic. Because of the doc stuff, I don't know about that. These are the lints from the Bevy project for the most part. So the ones that I really care about are up here: type complexity, too many arguments, and the documentation ones. I don't actually do pointer stuff. I just kind of copied these lints down here from the Bevy project because I trust their opinion about things that I'm not working with. So I'm basically just matching the Bevy lints, which is why I don't have like pedantic or anything on. That is a common issue too. It'd be nice if all the functions whose name is ending by system are added as a system to generate a warning. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have a strong opinion one way or the other. I messed something up here though, because I see a red squiggle. Dead code warnings are enough, except for the fact that I also turned on the documentation warning, and now if you look at my warnings, they're just massive amounts of warnings, and I'm not paying attention to them. So let that be a lesson to warning fatigue is a thing. People just ignore them if there are too many. But I am actively working on writing documentation for the rest of the stuff, so I'll get back to the point at which the warnings matter pretty soon. Okay, so our system is running now. We still don't look like we are matching on the sensor, so that's unfortunate. Also just started with Rust and want to do an easy game for start. Currently decided to Sudoku Terminal UI instead of 2D, 3D. Took Ratatouille for it. Yeah, cool. Whatever works for you, you know? Started learning programming at 32 2 years ago. Programming is a calculator. Okay, I'm not sure what you're saying on the last end of it, but yeah, nobody's too old to learn how to program, for sure. Can do it whenever you want. What's something you want to see come to Bevy? I would like to see an editor come to Bevy just so that people get what they kind of keep asking for. I'm really looking forward to seeing Bevy kind of break out of like programmers only and into the wider like you know, things like asset driven development, things like people building stuff in their like program of choice, which is why I'm like super into things like the Bevy component workflow stuff in that repo, or the Bevy Blender component repo, because working in Blender and then being able to label components just the same way we're doing in Tiled right now is really nice, right? Like letting people work inside of artistic mediums or creative programs and build games. And like the Bevy project is moving in that direction. I have full confidence that we'll get there eventually. But that's the direction. That's the kind of thing that I would really like to see overall. Okay, so this system is not working. The system is running because when the player isn't available, this spins. So let's do what, colliding entities. This might be because I customized the collision, is the one thing that I am going to say. So I might have done this to myself. I guess we should do the player entity here too. So let's do that, and let's do player entity and see what that logs out for us. Once there's a full Bevy editor, we're probably going to see a lot more adoption. Yes, obviously, definitely, 100%. I have full confidence that once it becomes like something that can be used by people who don't necessarily even write Rust at all, more and more people will use Bevy. That to me is pretty obvious. Okay, so we really aren't even iterating over. Did I write my query wrong for the actual collision stuff? So colliding entities and alternate state. Alternate state is on the tile. Okay, that makes sense. The sensor is on a child of the tile. The alternate state is on the parent. So we need what, parent here? Which I think we take as a reference, and then we need which cannot be mutable anymore. And this is now query alts, which is a query for the alternate state, which we don't need to qualify. And then query alts we can check against, I guess we need the entity up here. So entity here, if I type in the right locations, that's cool. So entity, colliding entities, and state. So we've got the thing that is being collided with, which is a sensor. And we've got the entities it's colliding with and the parent. The parent is the thing that needs to match the query alt stuff. So this is not the right place for that, is it? So entity, colliding entity is parent. I don't know that we need entity here. We do need parent. So query alts dot get parent. Let, what is this? Is this okay? I forget what this returns. I think it's some maybe. Else this. So we continue. Let some. I'm just going to call it P for the moment, and we'll rewrite it to be something else. This is going to be parent.get, I think, if I remember correctly. I don't work with parents that often. And then this is going to be okay. I can already tell that that's what's going on there. So we have P here. And then we need to check for this entity. No. What did I do? I went up, I got the tile. Yeah, okay. I think that's fine. Alternate state is not assets. It's not an asset. It's a component on the tile. So the way our tiles are set up right now, because it's all coming from tiled, is there's a tile entity, and then there is any colliders and stuff are attached as children of that tiled entity. Or the tile entity. So everything is in the right position and whatnot, but the structure is more of a tree, which is a little bit awkward to work with. And we like, realistically, we're making a little bit of like developer experience sacrifice to get the ability to do this inside of the tile editor. So the code is going to look a little bit messier, because the editor experience is going to be better. Could you introduce a bit your screen layout and what tools you use for this project? Sure. These two on the top left and top are Alacrity, whatever you want to call it. It's a terminal. I use new shell for the shell. This is VS Code in the bottom right. The language is Rust. The game engine is Bevy. If you have any more specific questions, I can definitely answer them. We're using Blender for animations. So this is my Blender script to render out different angles of this character. If I go into the animations, you can actually see these animations all running and whatnot. And this is the scripting pane. And then we're using tiled, T-I-L-E-D, to do the level with a prototype tile set that I'm going to replace at some point. And then the character is also going to get replaced at some point. So do we have state? We need state from this. This is going to be state. And we're actually not using entity, but I'll keep it around for a second. I haven't thought through the collision logic, the contains logic yet. I think the contains logic still needs a modification. So we have a query for sensors. All of the sensors in our scene, if you will, and the colliding entities are like the things that are colliding with those sensors. We have a query for any tile that has an alternate state component. So any entity that has an alternate state component, that's the component that we just created and added to our tile set. We have a query for the player specifically, which will give us the player entity, specifically the collider though. So this is actually a query for the player collider, not the player itself, which is a child of the player. So to put all that together, we need to check to see if the player collider is interacting with the sensor. And if it is, then we need to change the alternate state. And the entity IDs are how we're going to get all of this stuff. All of these queries effectively act as like little databases. Hey, have been following you for a while. Didn't know you streamed. Have a nice stream. Much love. Yeah, I appreciate that. Glad you're enjoying the stuff. I've been streaming on Saturday mornings for, I think, about like 2 months now. I used to stream a couple years ago, and then I just stopped. But back at it. Okay, so we never make it into here. So this should be at least one of these sensors should show up. This is going to be our first like debug. Our first kind of like, does it even work at all? So we do have a sensor. It's running a bajillion times a second. And then query alts parent get. I think this is the way we need to do this. Let's do a warn here. I think this is the only sensor in the scene. So this debug is fine for us. I think that's what we're hitting too. So sensor is just a marker. Yeah, it doesn't have any data at all in it. It's just a modification for interesting. Okay, so this query alts never hits. Could I use changed sensor? You cannot. Sensor is just a marker to adjust how the collider works. So the collider is actually the thing that we need to test against. Which is what colliding entities is doing, or should be doing. Did you add the collider in tile with an object layer? No. I added it to the tile set. Which is kind of why we're doing this like slightly awkward like tree dance. Let's see. So tile entity has the alternate state. If we look at the tile entity and we look for the colliders, as the truck passes. We put in sensors into these tile entities, basically, but they are as children. So commands tile entity, add child collider ID. So any colliders that we have, including the sensor that we created, are children of the tile entity. The child entity has the alternate state. So that should overall work. Main, what file were we in? Sensors. What we can do is some little hacky stuff. Commands.entity parent.get dot log components. That is what I think it's called. I don't know why Rust Analyzer doesn't want to help me there. I think it's because that function doesn't exist in that spot. Oh, right. We don't have commands. That's why. Commands is how you interact with the world. Capital W world, it's a struct. So then we have... let's get rid of this other terminal that we don't need. That's just kind of taking up space. Has sensor. And then we'll do this with a debug formatter. Why not? That'll come back as like effectively a vec. Actually, this isn't going to come back as anything because that logs out on its own. Now that I think about it. So you can see all of the entities for the sensor. Or actually, this should be the parent. So this should be the thing with the alternate state on it. Tile position, transform, name. So these clearly don't have the alternate state on them, which is interesting. So I've set up my tiles in the wrong way. Oh, you know what? This is a lot of log out right now. Maybe we do the entity ID for the moment. Let's do the entity for the moment. Let's do the sensor entity to make sure that we actually do have the sensor. Not hitting the right button there at all. Okay, let's get rid of this because we don't need that, I don't think. And this will be commands entity log components, and this will be commands parent.get log components. This is the, if we have a sensor, then we will log out a bunch of stuff. I feel like log components is one of those things that people don't realize is there. Because usually it's like, oh yeah, you need to write queries or like query for specific component, but like that's not technically true. You don't actually need to do ECS stuff. You can just do things arbitrarily. Okay, so we've got entity 116 here, 117 there. That makes sense. I think those are the only two that we have. So let's check to see which one those are. Can I see 116? 116 is the switch plate. What is 117? 117 is switch plate inactive. Switch plate inactive does not have... So we are going from the collider to the switch plate. The switch plate is the tile, right? Because in tiled, I've gone to switch plate. Switch plate has the name. The name is on the tile entity, right? let's get rid of this for a second. String value, sensor. So if it is a sensor, then the collider gets this name and the sensor. These are added to the collider ID here. So that's the collider entity ID, which then gets added as a child of the tile entity. The tile entity itself is defined up higher. The tile entity, did I misname alternate state already? Alternate state. Let's do this. Let's do panic alt tile info alt tile. So this should crash the program, which is what I'm expecting it to do. But it should log out for us at that arbitrary location. So actually, I am doing something wrong here. We aren't adding the thing at all. So let's see. Properties, alternate state. Let's debug the tile properties. Is that a good idea? That's going to be a lot of properties. I think we want to do that. It won't show alternate state. Let's run this, I guess. We'll run the application and try to just kill it and look at the logs, I think is just what I'm going to do. Actually, now that I think about it, this needs to happen there. I think this runs so fast. Okay, so properties here, right? These are all the tile properties that are coming in. We've got name switch plate inactive. That does not have, you know what I didn't do? Yeah, y'all are gonna laugh at me. I don't think I exported the tile map. Yeah, I didn't export the tile map, y'all. Well, sometimes it really do be like that. You know, you talk, you read chat, you answer questions, you talk to thing, you write some code, you do it again, and sometimes you miss stuff. Okay, so we don't need to log components anymore because I think we're good here. I got rid of the panic, I think. That explains why the sensor wasn't working, because the sensor didn't have... that's also going to be the downside of working in the editor, is it's going to be really easy to make that mistake. So maybe we write some systems at some point to do some checks. So like anything with a sensor either has to have an alternate state component on it or something else like that. I don't know what the full category of stuff is, but that might be a good like bootstrap system, like debug system effectively to write, especially for this Bevy ECS tiled integration. Because otherwise it's going to be so easy to mess up. Have a QA at the end of the live stream. Do you mean like quality assurance, like QA testing, or do you mean like question and answer? Because if you want a QA, I can definitely just do that whenever. Hot reloading from the editor without save export. Is it possible? Is it possible for Rust code? It is possible in both of those situations. One thing that I'll say is that I broke the hot reloading somehow when I wasn't paying attention. So if we get rid of all these logs that are constantly pouring out, right? And I run the application, we should reach a stable state because I've gotten rid of the things that are just like spamming the console. Okay, so we're here. We have a stable state, right? Hit enter a couple times. If I go in here and I'm like, I want one of these switches over here, and I save, and I export, and I go back, notify RS debouncer loop panic. So it's actually something related to the file watching, I think. That is an issue. I haven't looked into this yet. It does and can reload, like hot reload. Absolutely, 100%. It was actually doing that before. And then I guess I wrote some code and broke it. I don't know. So totally, definitely for assets, like 100% for maps, for Blender stuff, for I don't know if y'all are familiar with Astortion and Arthur Fishel's channel. See if I can get this up without playing the video. This channel, Astortion, they do Blender file hot reloading for like Bezier curves and stuff. You can also do Rust code hot reloading. It's just that Rust code hot reloading is significantly more complicated. Significantly more complicated. You have to use the same version of the Rust compiler, so you can't switch between any versions. This is a project that does this. Dexterous developer. There are people using this project to do that. There are some warnings. Won't work on mobile or WASM, so sorry, mobile and WASM. But there are prototypes of this working. It technically does work. It just is probably more complicated than doing like an asset. But I would say if you're interested in looking into it, this is the library that I keep seeing come up over and over whenever people talk about hot reloading Rust inside of Bevy. I don't particularly feel the need to have it, so I haven't set it up. But at some point, I might make a video on it or something. Okay, so we've got player on switch and the state. I feel like here, all we really want to do is switch the state. I'm trying to think a little bit about how to do it from an indexes perspective. Because I want to store the state in alternate state, right? So I want, where's our switches? So I want alternate state. It holds the current state. It holds the offset. I don't know that the offset is really what we want. I don't know if we can get the index in any way other than manually typing it in, though. The easiest thing to do would be like OG index, right? So we have like the original index and also the offset or the second index, because this is an alternate state. I am trying to think about how this works inside of tiled. Like there's a bunch of ways that this could definitely work, right? But when we're in tiled, is there any kind of reference property? Bool, color, float, file, object, string. What is object? Test. Object, is object like one of these things? Can I just... click here. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. I don't know what object is. So like there's definitely other ways that I could do it. I don't know tile that well. But yeah. Just joined. Does hot reload actually work with code? Yeah, totally. Do the Kenny asset angles match the 8 angles of the Blender character? Technically, no at the moment. So that's because I did the Blender assets differently, right? So if I run this, the angles that I'm calculating inside of my Rust code are the 8 angles of like 45 degrees, if that makes sense. So it's like north, northwest, like that kind of thing. So if I run this way, you can see that I'm slightly offset from the angles that the tiles are using. I don't know if I want to fix that. I feel like I should, but I also don't know what impact that has on playability if somebody uses a keyboard. So I've just decided, in the interest of not knowing which is better, to not put work into a solution that I don't know is going to be better. My intention is to do this with a controller. So we're going to have far more angles when you're on controller. We're going to have more than 8, that is. We're going to have like, I don't know, 30 or something like that. But yeah, the angles of the direction you're moving and the isometric tile angle don't necessarily match up at the moment because the projection isn't correct. I think if I changed it, if I did a view projection on the angle, basically take like an XY and I forced it into the isometric perspective, then it would match. But I'm just not doing that right now. That's all. Okay, so we need the index of the tile that we're working with, I guess. I don't love that idea. And I don't think that's easy to get from the editor. That object reference thing really seemed like a better approach. So let's go look at the tile docs. Docs. I guess what objects are, like we're just doing drawing colliders on the tiles right now. I guess objects are probably, we don't have any support for object layers, by the way, is something worth pointing out at the moment. We only have tiled layers implemented. So there are group layers, image layers, tile layers, and I think that might be it. And there's colliders that we don't have implemented either. I'm using polygons for pretty much everything right now. We're not going to implement text. Okay, so objects. Objects are like player spawn points. By using tile objects, objects of various types can be made easy to recognize, or they can be used for purely graphical purposes. In some cases, they can replace the use of tile layers entirely, as demonstrated by this thing that we don't have running and don't have a link to. Cool. I don't know what the difference between tiles and the things that we're drawing, or the objects and the things that we're drawing are, honestly. In any case, I don't think that an object reference looks like what we want. True or false, color, file, floating point number, int, object, or string. So I don't think that we get in editor support for picking an index in our atlas. Not my favorite. There are custom enums. Interesting. Worth looking into at some point. Typed tiles. Oh, I guess the objects are more generics and can be anything. Yeah, that is what it's looking like. Because they keep referencing like tile objects. But I think that diving into that is something I'll do off stream. So if that is the right approach, I'll have to read these docs and do some experimentation. So that's not what I'm going to do currently. I think I'm going to do something really hacky and awful currently. I was hoping I could just do the offset for the moment. So like state +4, right? Which would work. But then we need to get the tile and so we need to keep the state of, actually we don't. We can just do plus and -4. It's a switch. Okay. That's much better. So the idea here was, in my head, we needed the original index to be able to get back to it when we switched, but we actually don't. If we're inactive, then we've added this value. If we're inactive, we've subtracted this value. So we always know where we are. So with that said, is state not what I think it is? State dot current state. Shorten this a little bit here. Okay, so we've got this. These are going to be flipped. So like this. That's not exactly what we want. If player is on switch, so if we're inside of this, then we're actually just going to set it, I think, now that I think about it. So state.current state equals active state, active, right? Active state, inactive. And I think that these are not currently mutable, if I remember correctly. So get mute maybe. So this should give us the switch on which we can modify tiles. So if I stand on this, we have alternate state active, then we get off and it stops, which is what we want. So if the active state is active for a given tile, though, do we have the tile ID or do we need the transform? What do we have on entity? I think parent is actually what we're going to want, but yeah, this is the collider. So this is all of the Bevy XPB 2D stuff, linear velocity, all kinds of things, visibilities. I think we want parent, which will be the tile entity. So entity 116 should be the parent. If I remember correctly, it is. It's got a tile position. It's got a tile map ID, a tile texture index. That's what we want. That's what we want. We want, let's see, is alternate state on the parent? I think it is. So we can do this then. Tile texture index, which we need to bring in. And then when we iterate over this, where's query alts, this is not just state, this is state and index, right? And then index dot what? I think one of these is going to be plus equals and one of these is going to be minus equals, but they're both going to be acting on state dot offset. And I think that the way that I'm writing this at the moment is going to cause it to continue to run. So we only need to run it on change. But yeah. If Blender character angle matched the assets, would different character angles be easy? I am defining the character angles. I think we missed that earlier. The angles for the Blender character are angles that I have set up a camera for and rendered out specifically. So if we look at the Blender script here, I don't know if I can make this any bigger. Camera angles. If the Blender character angle matched the assets, would different camera angles be easy? I don't think that's a matter of the angle. Like the Blender character angle from the camera and the isometric angle should already match. I don't know that they do. I think I messed that up when I rendered out these images, but they should match. And then multiple camera angles is not easy at that point because you would have to only view it from a 45-degree angle, right? You could only view it from the way we have this set up right now, right? Is like this diamond. You would only be able to view it from north, south, east, or west. You would have to flip all of the tiles to be the relative rotation. So we do have all of those tiles and we could theoretically do that. Angles of degree is not in radians. Big no-no. I don't remember saying degrees, but yeah, so we could only view it from one of the four angles because it's an isometric projection. And it's all 2D sprites, so we would have to pre-render the entire sprite sheet. We can definitely do that. I don't think that it's worth it in this case. I'm not really interested in doing all of that work. But we do have the rotations for a lot of those elements. So we could theoretically do that. I don't know what kind of impact that would have on things like collision or whatnot. Not too worried about that because I'm not going to do it. But yes, theoretically, we have everything we need to actually do a second camera angle. I am just not really intending to do that at all. Okay, so I guess if we're changing state, then we need to do this, right? So if state.current state is not equal to active state active, we didn't implement equality here, so we got to go do that. But then we change it and we also do the index. And this is going to be the same thing down here. Active state, inactive. Wrap that. These need to be mutable. We have them as mutable. We're getting mute. So dereference, I think. But let's do the equality first. So active state needs partial eq. And this is total equality. So we'll add that marker as well. I don't think we want ord or anything. I don't think we need ord. Okay, and then we got one more thing for these indexes. The Blender script has 360/8 when it should be tau over 8. Yeah, okay, fine. You're right. Index. Where's index? Texture index is what I called this. You got me. I did degrees in my script. What am I doing? Cannot do minus equals on mute. I thought that was because of the dereference. Maybe I messed up. Oh, tile texture index doesn't implement it. Okay, that's fine. What is tiled texture index? I think that is... Yeah. So I don't think we need any of that, actually. And these need to be modified because they are both, so we actually don't end up doing that anyway. Plus this. So this is going to be checked add. State.atlas index offset. Is that gonna work out in our favor? I'm matching my numeric types up here is all that I'm doing. So we've got a U32, I think, in the texture index. And the atlas index offset is an I32. And I'm just thinking through what happens if we, in the tiled map editor, set a subtraction that goes below 0. We probably won't have an addition that goes above, like int max or whatever, but that's fine. So I think we take this, we do let this result, and I think result is it a result or is it a, yeah, okay, it is. Else do something else. And then this will be result as U32. I think maybe that's not a result. Maybe it's an option. This needs to be changed. And this would be a warning if we were going to do it. This still doesn't like that, so let's do what instead? Text atlas index offset needs to still be the I32, and we need to do the math as an I32 and then convert back to a U32. And when we do the conversion, we need to figure out whether it matches or not. Saturating? No, I think so. I think the I think any of the functions on U32 are going to want a U32, which we don't have, and we can't create without losing data. So I think all of these, like checked add, right hand side is a U32. Saturating would do the same kind of thing. Also, the issue isn't that I want to saturate it. The issue is that I want to know if it fails, right? Like I want it to log out or do something if it fails. So I think I need to convert this to an I32 and then back to a U32. right? Because if we do texture index as I32, and then we do plus the offset, and then we don't get this yet because that's not what we're looking for. So we do this, and then can we do U32 try from? Normally I would just cast, right? Normally I would just do an as cast. But in this case, I really do care about indexes that are incorrect, right? If we have an index that's -1, I actually really care about knowing that we have an index that's -1. So I'm doing the extra work to make sure that if we do end up with that, that we notify ourselves. And then this is a result for try from, maybe? Yeah, okay. I don't know how to write the good warning for this. A texture index overflowed or underflowed. And then what do we put in here? We put texture index.0 and state.atlas index offset. And this is getting way over there for whatever reason. So we're going to bring this over here like this. So we've got this warning that should work for us now. It's a little bit messy. I might clean it up later. Is that what I want it to say? A texture index overflowed or underflowed. I guess this is an error if it happens, right? So we'll use error instead. And then the texture index is probably going to be wrong in some respect. So can we get entity colliding entities parent with sensor alternate state tiled texture index? It would be cool if we could do something like this. I actually don't know if we can do that. Option, prelude name, component is not satisfied, is the... Yeah, okay, there we go. That's the right thing. And maybe name. And then if a texture index overflowed or underflowed for this, and we'll make this just a debug, and we'll put this here. So if we've had enough foresight to set up a name for this tile, then we will get an error message that gives us the name of the tile, the texture index, and the offset that is trying to be added. And it will tell us if we've gone in the wrong direction too far. I don't anticipate this error to pop up very often, but I do imagine that it will be a really, really, really annoying one if it does happen. So I want to make sure that it doesn't. And then because we have a U32, we can just set it there. So we do the same thing here, right? We set the state, we do this. This is going to be a subtraction and not an addition. And then this is going to be the result as U32. I think it's already a U32 because we did the try from, so we're good there. Okay, so if I wrote all of that correctly, I think we should get the depressed tile. And we do. So now we have tiles working. Now we're not spitting out an event when it changes or anything, which we probably want to do at some point. But this is using a sensor that we built in tiled with some information that we built in tiled to switch the active state for this sensor. We can get rid of some of these logs now. So we have all of the infrastructure we need to fire an event if we want to. What is the warning here? Query alts get parent mute. I don't think we need to warn here. I think that this skipping through some sensors. Let's see. Sensors, entity colliding entities parent with sensor. And this is for query alts. So not every sensor is going to have a parent. Because we could have other sensors. So I don't think we want the warning. Because I think this is a normal thing to happen. We can get rid of this. These errors are the only thing we really need. No player available. The way we have the system running, this happens all the time. I don't think we need to warn. This could be run if in state, what is it, game state? What did I call it? App state? App state in game. So it should only run now when we're in the game. So we should be able to leave that log. And if we don't have a player, then we probably want to see it. Don't want to be in A star. But the collision detection polygon for the switch could maybe be smaller and cover only the movable part of the switch. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We could do that. It does look like you can only step on that middle part, doesn't it? You're absolutely correct. So let's fix that. We could do that. That's pretty easy. What do we have here, though? We have a couple of custom properties that I probably want to keep around, right? I've named this something, so let's copy this. Let's do this, and then I will take this and do bottom, 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 bottom. I think that's the right collider. It's interesting because that leaves something to be desired on the top. So theoretically, this is like a little off. But I think due to the projection that this is the right collider. We want the base of the switch to be the collider. So can we copy properties? Copy. Pasta. We get rid of this. We save this. We have to re-export. And it should just work. And it does not because I did what? Switch plate. Oh, because I copied the wrong thing. Name switch plate. Did I not include sensor? bool check. Export. Okay, I've messed something up. What did I mess up? Let's go back a couple steps maybe. So I want this collider data, right? And we'll get rid of these. And I'll paste this in, right? Now these are the same. Save this. Export. All right, there we go. How does that feel? Obviously, the collider isn't going to show up when the game is actually being played. So it'll just be whatever. But the workflow there, while being very error prone, as we've seen, right? Like there's nothing saving us if we write in the wrong data. Aside from that, I think the workflow of using tiled as a level editor and drawing the colliders and putting them in and stuff is very nice. Way more correct. Cool. So that's a switch. The switch is working, as they are wont to do. So maybe we do... The switch doesn't do anything. So maybe we leave it to do here for the sensors, right? This is switching on and off, but it's not actually changing anything. So at some point, to do when sensors change alternate state, fire an event that can be handled to update game state logic or something. And then we don't need commands here. We can get rid of that. So I don't know if this is the way that this system is going to work moving forward forever. I think that holding the offset of the texture in alternate state is a little bit wonky and weird. I don't particularly like it. We might be able to do something with objects, at which point I might rewrite this system, but I'm cool with that working for the moment. I want to do one of the other switches as well. Commit with sensor switches work. Okay, so can we reuse any of this for the other things that we have to do? These are sensors, so they are different than interactables, I think. The way that I'm thinking of the difference is basically, so we have this sensor, you can interact with it technically, but it's implicit, right? Because you're over the sensor, it is active. If this chest or box was a chest that you wanted to open and interact with, that would be probably a completely different thing. I think we need like a raycast for that. Or if I wanted to interact with this switch here, I think that this would also be like a raycast. Because that's the only way that I can think of getting the information from one thing to another off the top of my head. So if you're standing here and you want to interact with that, you basically have to raycast from the player out to determine whether there is an interactable thing in front of you. Which is a little bit like a sensor. But has a different trigger. So the user needs to first be able to press an interact button. And then that needs to fire basically the same logic we just did. Am I going to rig my Blender character to interact with things for special events? Rig it with other assets inside Blender? What do you mean by special events? And the answer in general is probably I don't know. Let's see. Switch. Do we do switch or do we do crate? I think crate is probably easier, but switch should also work when crate works. Oh, I don't know what the answer is going to be there. I feel like to start, I'm not going to. But I could maintain a list of like things that I need to write animations for. Right? Because like right now we have a little like druid looking character, right? Little magic user. So theoretically this person could like wave their stick for an interact. You're a genius. I don't know about that. Appreciate your confidence in me though. So like if I'm standing here or whatever and I want to hit that, I don't necessarily need to do like an integrated animation. I could do a little bit of a set piece. I don't know exactly how the game is going to play yet. So like if I do a full animation to make this thing work just for the switch, right? It could take a second for you to have to do that, which impacts where those switches can be placed in the level and whether you're being attacked or not, that kind of thing. Or maybe no raycast, the collision detection might still be enough, something like a sensor, but only activatable with additional manual action. Depends on the distance. Yeah, I think I could see that working. For example, like, let's say this isn't a switch. Let's say this is the thing for the box. And like, there's some, I don't know, weird magic thing that you do for this box. And you have to stand on the switch and also press the interact button to move the box. I could totally see that. I think that because of this switch, for example, you probably aren't going to be standing here to interact with the switch, right? You're not going to be standing under the switch. And technically, this is on which tile? Okay, so technically this is in this tile. So actually, we could theoretically do that. That would work. Having a sensor here would work. Let's see. Where's our switch? I think it's this one. So the downside of this is that the tiled editor doesn't make it easy for me to figure out where the thing should be. So let's say from like here, and I follow this line out to like here, and then I try to match the angle there, and then I try to match the angle here, and then there. So like this is kind of a shitty collider, but this could theoretically be a sensor. I think that this we'll probably want that to be bigger and probably be like more circular. But let's try this for a moment. Yeah, see where that goes though? That is in the wrong spot. Can I do... No, I can't do side by side. That's unfortunate. Okay, so this needs to be way the hell down here. In vaguely the same place. But it's not there. It is like... here? It's really unfortunate. Yeah, okay. So that's roughly the right spot for the sensor. It's a really shitty sensor, but it's the right spot for it. One option is to have a map object that knows where objects are on the map and their coordinates, and you can just calculate the coordinates of the map cell they're facing and check if an object is there. I don't love the idea of keeping like a global registry of everything in the map. I think we can do everything component based and everything like fairly local. And then if we need to serialize the state of anything, we'll be able to just grab it off the components and save it. But yeah, so we've got this switch here, right? So because we have this switch, we should be able to reuse the logic that we just had actually. And this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 again. So this is our other one, right? This one. Grab the alternate state so that I don't mess up the naming. And then I put this here, and this is not a switch plate. This is a wall switch. Maybe I'll copy this as well, and I'll do... I don't know, maybe I'll just do wall switch here. Maybe I'll start naming these for the sum of their parts. So alternate state 4, and then sensor. We don't have anything on the other sensor, right? We've got name and sensor. So technically, if we stand there, that should work. And then we'll need an additional component to basically prevent the sensor from activating until you push a button. So if we go over here, I think this should... Yeah, okay. So it flips up, which is great. So technically, this is working already. And then it's really awkward to stand in that spot. But it works. Reusing the existing one is simpler. Yeah. So like, obviously, if we do the sensor-based approach, like you probably want to be able to stand slightly further away, you know, like I don't want to have to be in the switch to trigger it. Also, I think that will probably end up making it a little bit more complicated because like, why wouldn't you want to, you know, hit it with an attack and switch it on or off? Like that could be cool. But we'll go with the sensor for now, I think, because the sensor is interesting on its own. I don't think the sensor works for the box though. Is like if I am here and I want to interact with the box, I don't think expanding the sensor outside of the box is going to be the way that I want that to work. Because you don't want to be standing like here and interacting with the box facing the other direction. So I think we do want the raycast for the box. But for the switch, I think we have the option. I think we can either do a sensor with a button press, or we can do a raycast. The other thing I'm thinking of is I'm probably going to want to be able to tell you that you can interact with this, right? So the sensor is really nice for that, because if we are on the sensor, then we can interact with it. The raycast also works for that, but we would have to do a constant raycast all of the time. Which I don't think is really a problem. But I do kind of like the sensor approach. So let's make this trigger on player press then. So we're using this logic right now. I don't think that I want to reuse this. I think I want to add a component that requires a press. It is going to be largely the same logic. And I may refactor them to be the same thing. But I think what I'm going to do here is name this an incredibly long, ridiculous name. And then do this. These both are going to go there. And then where's our player action? Action like, move, dash, and then we'll have interact with environment. So this is Leaf Wing Input Manager that I'm setting up these actions for. And then we'll be able to query this. And we'll put a component on it that says like needs an interaction or something. Controller action, action state. We spawn the player in main right now. So I think that's also where we declare our input map, which isn't the best. I should move that, but it's fine. So input manager, input map is here. So dot what? So dash is space. And then action interact is going to be I. Key I. So for now, I'm just going to use the keyboard, hit I, and that will cause an interact. So the player sensor, this is the player collider. Do we need the player collider? We do need the player collider for the sensor, but the input map is on the parent, so we do need the parent. Right. So parent. So query player parent. Let's make this query player collider. This is not the player entity. This is the player collider entity. So we should rename this in the other system as well. Right, player collider entity. Why is that not happy? Because this is no longer just that. That's the player collider entity and the player entity. Which is why I did the rename first. So this is the player entity now. We can do query player. Maybe we'll look into ARY, AERY for relations. That might make some of this like up-down logic that we have going on, this tree-nested stuff, a little bit easier. So if we're with player, right, we need the action state. I think. Query action state action. So action state is a component on player is the issue here, which is why we're querying it like this. Query action state action, query action state action with player. Let's run it, I guess, and see what the problem is. Did I not import it? Did I not? I didn't import it. Action needs to come in as well. Do we have player? I think we have player. Okay, so we got a couple of things in here now. What else do we need? I guess with player, not with shared reference to player. It would be nice if those error messages were a little bit better, but they're not terrible either. Query player. So query player needs to happen as well. So this is not going to necessarily be player entity. We're going to do the same thing we did here, just to make it easy on ourselves. No player collider available, no player available. This is just going to be the action state. This is going to be query player, get single. Quick Bevy question. What is the performance hit of the query in systems, or how can it be measured? You can measure things with profilers is what I would say. The query itself doesn't have a performance impact as I understand it until you actually iterate over it. Like iterating over it actually fetches the entities from the archetype, if I remember correctly. So if you are not iterating, then the performance characteristics are different. But I would say if you're not profiling, then no like hearsay matters. Like no, I could tell you anything about query, but it wouldn't matter unless you saw it show up in your profile. F is common for interact on WASD controls. Absolutely. F to pay for specs. My answer to performance stuff is always, if you profile and you see it show up, then care about it. And if you don't see it show up in your profile, then don't care about it. Okay, so this all of this logic is exactly the same. So I think for now, we'll do the hacky version. I think that something that would be really interesting would be to show a little box above the player to tell you to hit, you know, like I or whatever, or F or whatever we end up using when you're next to something that is interactable. But for the moment, I'm just going to block the actual execution. On whether you're pushing the button or not. And action state dot pressed. Is this the right place to put this? I think I wrapped this whole thing. If action state dot just pressed action interact, then we execute this logic, and otherwise we don't care. So actually we could bring that interact out to the outside. if we wanted to, and lock out a little bit more of this looping. But I think I'm going to change it in the future anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. So we should, well, that's because the other system is still operating on it. How do we prevent that from happening? This is for all sensors, right? With sensor, without interactable. Interactable isn't a component yet, but we're going to make it one. With sensor, with interactable. In interactable. And this component, we're probably going to put again in here. Interactable with component and debug. And this will be a struct, interactable, public. And then inside of here, there's sensor, right? So this is get sensor. So we need to do the same thing. Interactable, if we set it as being interactable. And we'll name it interactable the same way, and we'll insert interactable. And then interactable needs to be set in here. So this is alternate state, wall switch. We need this to be interactable as a Boolean, check. And then we need to export this again so I don't forget that. And then theoretically, we're going to get an error because I didn't import interactable. Just thought about if you have two closed systems that do almost the same thing, do you get hassle for merging them into one system or keeping them separate? I think that you should handle it in the way that your brain works first, right? I don't think you will get enough of a performance hit for it to matter. If you do, if you're profiling and it is, then change it. But start with what makes the most sense for your code organization and your project organization. Like, do it so that you can modify it in the future first. And then if you need to do performance work, do performance work later. Okay, so this is not there, and then I can hit the key. For some reason, we can't turn it back down. Why can't we turn it back down? What is it that we need to turn down for? Okay, so we've got action state just pressed, right? Sensors, the collider is still there. It doesn't get removed. Which is the way that I'm doing everything right now. I'm only changing the index of the texture atlas, which I don't think matters. Oh, does it not have alternate state? I think no, it does. We're good. Why would this not be interacting again? If they're not mutable queries, having them separate causes them to run in parallel. Absolutely. Bevy will do some nice scheduling for you in terms of like when your systems run inside of a frame. That is really nice. Xavier is saying that there's a page in the docs regarding the performance hit. There is definitely Bevy docs for the way in which different ways of accessing different kinds of data, what their big O complexity is, and stuff like that. I don't know if that exists on the query page specifically. There we go. Here it is. Creating query is low cost, constant operation. Iterating it, like I was saying earlier, iterating it fetches the data and generates the item, which can have that computational cost. And then you have different ways of storing things based on how you're accessing them. This is what Hukasu was just saying, where two systems can't be executed in parallel if the same component that they access are mutable. Optional components are something I try to avoid because of this specifically. Basically increases the number of component or entities that a query matches against. So for example, we have that one optional name component, but I really think that's useful because if anything goes wrong, I want that name. I could also turn that off in production if I wanted to. Right, that could be only a debugging thing. And this is the computational complexity. And there's a huge table here. And you can tell it's only how you're iterating over. It's not the query itself. So, if you care, the information is here. But I, again, would say, write your code first, make the game work, and then if it's running too slow, then fix it. Okay, so I think you just need to fire up that loud. I don't know what you mean by loud. I think that might be a typo. Fire up that loud. Fire up that loud. What does that mean? So if we go over here, we stand in the sensor, I flip it up. I can't flip it down. Oh, turn down for what? I did say that earlier. And then I got distracted before I could see your response to the joke. I was joking about the song. You're right. You're right. Will 2D isometric need parallelization for anything? That is an extremely broad question. So the answer is probably yes. I don't know like how to answer that other than super generically. Right? Like the systems already run like concurrently unless you specify it not to in some way. So we're already getting a lot of that for free, or not for free, but like for not having to worry about it. The less you order things, the more things will run kind of not necessarily at the same time, but like concurrently. I never know whether people are referring to like the textbook definition of parallelization and concurrency, but like Bevy will handle, you know, the soft parallelization of systems and stuff. So like if we aren't accessing things mutably, then they can operate in parallel. Like if everybody's reading, then everybody can run at the same time. If everybody's mutating, then they need to run in some order. Okay. I don't know why we can't switch the switch up. Query sensors. So we're in the sensor with interactable. The texture index is the only thing we're changing, so none of this should change, like structurally. If action state just pressed, let's do an info here maybe. Intent to interact. So we should at least get there. Right? Intent to interact. So we are hitting the intent to interact. That's great. So colliding entities contains player entity, state current state, try from, we're not seeing any errors, inactive state. I think that the state isn't changing correctly. The sound system doesn't interact with the entities that are part of the game, so having them in parallel with game logic is a win. Yeah, for sure. Like audio stuff you're talking about? Active, active, inactive, inactive. All right, let's do, we're gonna do the console log debug here. Info, we're gonna go active. This will be inactive. And then we'll do another one inside. The ordering there should help us out, so I don't really need more than that. Play. Up. So intent to interact, active in the if. Intent to interact, active. Not in the if, because this logic is wrong. Because if we're in the sensor, no matter what, we need to flip it. And right now, we're only flipping it if it's in one state. So if we are in the colliding entities and we just pressed, so we can rip this out and put this up here, right? If we just pressed interact and the colliding entities contains the player, then we can match on current state. Right? And if we are active, we want to flip it the other direction. And if we're inactive, we want to flip it the prior direction. So I think this if is fine to keep. We can bring this into a guard if we want to, but I'm gonna just bring it in regularly first. So we're gonna break this logic up, and we're gonna put this here. So we're basically saying when you choose to interact and you're in a sensor that is interactable, you are choosing to flip it to the other side. And it only flips if it's in the wrong state. I don't know that we need that extra logic in this sensor example, but yeah, I think we don't need that extra logic. So I see the chat. I'm gonna finish writing this and then I'll answer. I think that Hukasu probably just answered it though. Current state. Current state debug. All right, I'll run that. Toggle would be better. You're absolutely right. Sound system, blah, blah, blah. Struggled beginning developing because of lack of knowledge about how to build some basic systems like game states and stuff. Same case for any engine. Always try to start out with a game, get stuck on architectural parts. Make small games that already exist. Exactly. Flappy Bird, Tic-Tac-Toe, 2048, anything like that. Anything that's small. The other thing that I'll say is if you're specifically working with Bevy, the Rust ecosystem has this amazing capacity to just have this examples folder in many projects. So Bevy specifically has, I think, 248 as of the stream yesterday examples in this folder. So if you want to do 2D stuff, 3D stuff, animation, deal with assets, audio, work with the ECS for the first time, there's a couple of actual games in here, like Breakout. They're pretty basic. They're meant to just show like the pieces working together, but for doing UI stuff, for doing stuff to the window, for dealing with time and timers, that would be my suggestion. What Hukasu said, build very small games to start with. Build up your knowledge. Use this examples folder whenever you kind of get stuck and need kind of a push. Maybe start adding a toggle method to active state would be better organization. I think you're right. Where are we right now? We're in a state where this doesn't work currently, right? It is always inactive. So actually I flipped these. And I think that the if doesn't matter here, because we're matching on current state anyway. And this logic, current state, needs to be up here. I think I flip-flopped them when I did this earlier. And this goes here. The toggle would do the same thing. I think the... Let's see if this works first. In sensor, up, down, hey. So now we've got our switch going up and down. No animation or anything, just kind of going up and down. It would be cool if it like, you know, made a thocky noise like light switches do. We'll get around to audio at some point. I'll probably do audio all off stream because I can't imagine audio being nice to hear while we're on stream. Just flip the match? Oh, rather than moving the code blocks back and forth? Sorry, minor. Is the character collider at the center of the character's feet? Effectively, yeah. I don't know that it's actually true, but see if I can make this as zoomed in as possible. Let's put this up here and then move it like this. This is about the closest I'm going to get to showing you. But yeah, the collider is effectively at the center of the feet of the character, but I actually didn't do any serious positioning. So I just kind of like offset it 10 pixels to the bottom. So in actuality, it's not really at the player's feet right now, but it should be. Like that's the intent. It kind of doesn't matter that it's a couple pixels off. unless it's bothering somebody, and then we can fix it. But the sensor works, the switch works, this thing still works. So we've got switches, we've got other wall switches and floor switches is the way that I'll frame it. These do need to fire like some kind of event or something. Because they need to transition and we need to be like, oh, you know, switch XYZ flipped, therefore we need to do something. I don't know what they're going to do yet. So I don't know what we're going to do for that event. Is a toggle on active state worth it? We could do active state dot toggle, and then we still have to know which state we were in to know which operation to perform. So I don't know that having a toggle function really actually buys us that much. The thing we're doing here if we remove this little piece of code is basically all of that, right? So basically all we're doing is texture index minus the offset, set the result. And the toggle we would still have to match on. So the only thing we would buy out of writing a toggle function is matching on the new state instead of the old state. Because active state is just this enum. So we would have to do it on the alternate state. If we did something on the alternate state where we did a toggle on the alternate state, we could probably set this index ourselves. Like if we did, impl alternate state, fn, mute self, toggle, and then this would be match self, current state. This would be our match, and then this logic would be the same thing. We would have to pass in the texture index as an argument. So we would take this, all of this logic here inside of this. And then put that here, which is these two, right? So then we don't have this would be anything we have state would be self, right? And continue is no longer going to work. So these are going to be return. And texture index and maybe name are going to have to be arguments, right? I guess we could do a return value here and set the index, right? I think that's the right thing to do. I don't think I want to pass the texture index in here. So let's do... Actually, we have to pass the texture index in here. texture index is then a mutable reference to, I don't know. I forget what texture index is. Let's leave this code here. Texture index is then a tile texture index. So that would be tile texture index. We don't have a return type, and then this needs to be imported, and maybe name is an option. Name, probably a reference to a name, right? So this toggle function theoretically works now. And back here, we can go back to getting rid of this stuff, and we can do, what is it? Action state, colliding entities, sensors, texture index, state toggle. I didn't make it public. And then we'll pass the texture index in, and the maybe name. So this would need to be public. This would need to be a mutable reference. And then I think we're good. I don't know that I love that, because I don't know what we're doing with it yet. So let's do this. Interaction still works, so we're good. So this would be the toggle function. Classical bad idea of mine, lots of complication to maybe not remove duplicated code with the other sensor in the end. Yeah. TBD. I actually think the toggle works for both of them, if I'm thinking about this correctly. If we match current state, and we're doing what in the other sensor? In the other sensor, we're doing some additional checks to make sure that we're not setting it if it's already set, but I don't think we need to. The one thing we can't do is toggle it back and forth all the time. So I think the way that this would work would be state.toggle end mute texture index, maybe name, right? I think that's how that would work. I think we still need to do these extra guards, but I think overall this would work. Yeah, so that works. Is it better? I don't know. I think that I probably want not just toggle. So like this is a true toggle, right? This, whatever state we're in, it's going to toggle. This, I think I would want a specific function to set active, right? Because these aren't technically toggles. They're just incidentally toggles. We're using toggle to do this, but only if that state is set. Is it possible to convert a single dimension game's movement to have this isometric view? Single dimension? You mean like just one line? Like just the x-axis? Oh no, Xavier, you're good. I think that I'm just talking through it for my own, like, that's how I determine whether it will be a thing that I do or not. I'm not judging the suggestion is the way that I would put it. I think that the answer to that is actually like this here probably goes into the other function, right? So we have toggle, we have set active and set inactive, and set active is this and set inactive is this. And then this toggle function just calls those functions and it's fine. I think that that's the way that that would actually end up working. I'm going to leave it for now, because I do think it cleans it up a little bit. It also makes it much more clear that this if needs to be additional. So if contains yeah, anyway, I think that's fine. Single dimension view like GTA 1. I think GTA 1 is 2-dimensional. You're talking about that like top down, like this version, right? This is a 2-dimensional game. The isometric view is a 2-dimensional, and this is also 2-dimensional. So they're effectively the same, just with a different linear transformation. So yes, my answer is yes. Basically, you can take GTA, and if you did all the art the right way, and you're basically just moving the camera, you could make it work. It would no longer be top down; it would be isometric. But it's effectively just that camera perspective, and they're both 2D games at the end of the day. Okay. This is now looking extremely messy, so maybe I'll refactor that sometime. Not right now, though. Okay, so our switch is working, right? I've saved everything. Switch is working, both the floor switch and the wall switch. Neither of them are firing events, but they both do the thing. This one requires you to interact with it manually. So sensor-based interaction and position or active, like collision-based interaction. The only other thing that I think that I want to do is that ray trace, or not ray trace. Yeah, let's just make the whole thing ray traced. That'll be a quick little thing. The only other thing that I want to do is raycasting. I think that I do want to do raycasting for the chest. Now, when we do raycasting, I can think of two ways to do it. We can either do it when you press the interact button, right? We can do the raycast when you press it, or we can constantly do the raycast and pop up like a potential user bubble that says, hey, you can interact with this. I think that where's the chest here? So there's a chest here, right? A crate, I've named it. Then on the collider then, right? I think, and this only works as long as this collider is only a single thing, I think. Actually thinking about that at this moment, I think that if I click on the tile should probably have the... I don't know if the tile or the collider should have the interaction. I haven't thought through it enough. I think we'll put it on the collider for now, because I think we just wrote all of the other code based on the collider, right? So we wrote this based on the sensor, and we wrote this based on the sensor. So we'll write the crate based on the collider as well. And then if we want to change it, we'll change everything, basically. Okay, so we got this. We've got the collider. We need a custom property here of some kind. What do we call this? Maybe press to interact. And it's a Boolean. I don't know what to do with this once we do press it. I don't think we have any other like good sprite to use. So maybe we just tint the color or something. But we'll have this press to interact. We'll add a new component. Export. I think this is one of the reasons that I didn't open source the Bevy ECS tiled implementation that I'm using, because I keep doing this like, I'm just going to throw another component in here kind of thing. So like interactable, but also, you know, like press to interact. That's probably the wrong naming now that I think about it. But if we have interactable, right, then it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be press to interact. And this is going to be is press to interact, right? And this is going to be press to interact. So we're basically just, based on the tiled information, adding more and more components to different things to make them do and behave differently. This is sensors, but I don't think that it will be forever. I think I'm just going to drop the additional code in here as well. Press to interact. We'll save this up here. And then we need to query colliders for press to interact that are not necessarily sensors. I don't think that we're going to do any sensors here. So let's make sure that we don't capture any sensors. This doesn't have an alternate state currently, so I'm just going to comment that out. The player collider is not relevant, I don't think. So let's take a look at the actual thing that we will be using to implement this. And this is going to be either spatial query, let's see, raycasting, like the chest emitting a light to the character. It's kind of like that. I don't literally mean light rays. I think inclined plane has the idea. Yeah, exactly. Inclined plane has it for sure. It's basically you fire either like a line or a shape in front of you, and if the shape or line collides with something, then you've hit. So you're casting either a point or a shape in front of you. I think spatial query is what we need here. So raycast, shapecast, point projection, and intersection. I don't know what point projection is. Spatial query that projects a point on the closest collider returns the collider's entity, the projected point, and whether the point is inside of the collider. Oh, that's just the closest collider. Let's read into that a little bit. Finds the projection of a given point on the closest collider. Is it in any direction? No. Project point 0. Our collider is treated as solid true. Query filter, default, projection. Is this really just like the closest collider? Interesting. That's cool. I didn't know that existed. Intersection tests are, I don't think that's what we want. We want either shapecasting or raycasting. I think we want raycasting, although shapecasting may be better for user experience. I don't know. We're going to start with raycasting though. A time of impact and a normal we've stored in ray hit data. There are two ways to perform raycasts like we were talking about. For simple raycasts, we can just kind of raycast every frame. I think this is what we want, the raycaster that we were looking at. And these will let you do things like not cast every frame. So I think this raycast, and I think it's in local coordinates, so I think we can just add this component effectively. Vec 0, direction 3D X, print hits. Maybe we just print hits for now. That sounds good. Raycasting, raycaster, spatial query, local origin and direction. So I think we don't rotate. So we might need facing to determine which direction we go in. So maybe let's get rid of all of this for the moment. And press to interact. We need to add to the player. I am given pause for a brief second because we have a collider on the player. And I don't want to hit that collider. I think that we'll be able to offset outside of that collider. But the right solution is going to probably be something else. Collision layers or something like that. No direction, no origin, just a point. The results of a raycast are in arbitrary order by default. You can iterate over them in the order of time of impact with the iter sorted method. Cool. So that'll be good for us because this will always hit the player first and we can just kind of skip that for the moment. Cool. For max hits, we probably want something pretty small. And then we'll use print hits to print out the hits. I think we already have the debug stuff on, so let's do a cast out from the collider location. So we'll do raycaster. Raycaster. Why does it not like raycaster? There wasn't a release of the collision library with raycaster in it, was it? Expected direction 2D. Ah, yes, because we are using 2D. That makes sense. I was looking at the 3D example. So this should go in the local X direction, which should be to the right. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. It just bounces off. That's so cool. I don't know if y'all can see this, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Come on, cooperate. So this is the raycast. Here we're hitting this little collider here, which is very cool. Here we're hitting the sensor, and it gives us that normal direction, which is kind of cool. I think we're also hitting the other thing over there. And this is hitting the box. So if we are a certain distance away from the box, right, then we will enable somebody to actually interact with it. This is kind of what I was getting at with the switch idea. Like the idea, because right now we're doing a sensor here, right? So if we do a sensor, it doesn't matter which way you're facing. You just have to be standing in the box, which is fine. I think that's valid. I think building that functionality was useful because we'll be able to use it for something at some point. But you probably don't want to like flip the switch if you're facing this way, right? If I'm facing that way, I probably don't want to flip the switch. So we might switch that to raycasting in the future. But I do think that that functionality was useful. So this raycast is local X. We need to change it to facing. How do we do that? Let's do we have player, triggers, systems. Let's put this in player. This is my future manage the index function. So let's do player forward raycast. And then this will be a query. If I can spell query. Okay, we can spell today. It's fine. Query player collider. So we're going to look for a raycast component that we want to be mutable. And we are also going to have the facing component, which is something that I'm already calculating. That is a custom thing that we built just for the 8 directional. You query the player transform and apply the rotation. I don't think I'm doing that currently. So I think that because I did this as an animation example first, that the thing that I'm doing to maintain the facing of the player is not actually a rotation. But you're right. I should probably drive it with the transform. So we've got this transform spatial bundle, puts it in some location. Where is my facing logic? Player systems. I don't think it's here. I think I put it in somewhere weird. Yeah. Let's see. Source player. Facing. Here's facing. Okay, that's all this is doing. Okay, that's why this, okay. The controller felt weird to me previously because I'm driving facing by which direction the player has last pressed via a direction 2D. So I'm going to use facing for the moment, but I think I'm going to add a to-do here. To-do facing should be driven by transform. I think that's, I think I should come back and do that is kind of what I'm getting at. So facing is a direction 2D. And in the future, we'll be able to replace that with just the direction 2D of the transform. Which will mean that I will have to refactor this, which I am okay with. So with player collider, raycast. I don't know what's wrong with that query, but we do need to just log hits. So raycaster, it's raycaster and ray hits. But right now, all we're doing is adjusting the raycaster to be in the right location. So for player or for facing raycaster in mute query, and raycaster is going to be mute, and this needs to be mute, and everything needs to be mute. Changed facing, could be, yeah. That would work. I think I'm just gonna deal with it as is for the moment. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we do changed facing when we're done with it. I think you're right about the transform, Xavier. I think that's probably the better way to do it. And I think I should refactor to do that. This game currently is built out of a couple of demos that kind of like stumbled my way into making a game. Because I did like the start menu demo and the 8 direction demo and the isometric level demo. And then suddenly I was just building a game. So there's a couple of things that are like dubious is the way that I would put it. So I'm going to live with it for now. But I'm going to add the to-do to refactor it later. Raycaster origin. No, origin is not what we need. We need raycaster direction equals facing. Facing.0. I don't think I implemented deref for this. So this to do drive based on transform, not facing. Actually, we probably could just do the transform now here. The thing is, I'm not rotating it. Yeah, currently I'm not rotating. I'm just doing the directionals. So that wouldn't work. So we have to do facing currently. So player forward raycast is going to have to be public, and we're going to have to add it. Basically, I just made some decisions when I was doing this as a demo that I probably should be relying on the transform, but I'm not currently. So dashing idling controller player forward raycast. Cargo run Ivy. Because I think that'll be enough to just put it in the right direction. Or maybe not. Let's see. Player forward raycast. Facing raycaster with player collider doesn't have the facing. Player has the facing. That's the other issue. So let's grab this. Did we put, I already forgot where we put the raycaster. Did we put the raycaster on the player, or did we put it on the collider? We put it on the collider. because I think I want it to come from the feet is my thought there. And it's easier to do that if it's on the collider. Which means that facing isn't even a component. What am I doing? No, yeah, it is. There we go. Facing. Starting to lose it. How 11 o'clock? Cool. Okay, so facing is on the parent, which means that we need to query collider. I think because I keep doing this like query collider thing, I am going to look into Airy, which will be interesting because I haven't used Airy yet. I haven't really had a reason to. Query facing. And I think that's fine. Mute query. Why is that? Oh, query collider. Is it okay? Let okay player or facing equals query player dot get single else. And you could unwrap here. I just don't like to unwrap here. I've taken this approach where I'm trying to, if I need to refactor, not break the game. And if I panic because there isn't a player, the game crashes. If I warn, then I will get the warning and be able to continue the refactor in increments. So warn, no player facing direction. And then this is not this, this is, it's, by the way, Xavier, it's totally okay if you're actually wrong on that. I will figure it out. You know, I'm going to try it. If it works and it makes sense, then I'll do it. And if it doesn't make sense, then I won't do it. It's that simple. For me, Raycaster and Query Collider. Okay, so I think that this should be tracking correctly now. The other thing is that facing doesn't account for everything. There we go. Here's our beam attack. This is it. You just do this the whole time. Okay, but now you have to actually point at the box. So while this like does kind of work, it could be a little bit annoying, right? Because like, should that hit? Probably. I think that from a user experience perspective, this is probably going to turn into a shapecast and not a raycast. But we are colliding, so we do have the information that we need now. So let's do this debug system that they had here, print hits. And I'm just going to drop this, I think, in main for the moment, and then we'll move it. Print hits. I feel like there's a music joke to make in print hits. Okay, so play. We've got this. So we're not hitting anything when we go low. We hit now. We're hitting an entity at a location with a normal, which is all fantastic information. I guess we do a query here for press to interacts, right? Query, I don't know, entity with press to interact. Right, like, we'll bring this in for the moment. not with shared reference, just with the component, query press to interact. For ray hits in query, this is giving us the ordered list. So we want to do iter sorted.find hit hit.entity query press to interact hit.entity is that enough? I don't think that's enough. I think we want the hit and the entity. What am I doing? So we need to do... Oh, because I didn't write get. I didn't write a function call here. So .get here, right? Theoretically, this would give us a result for the entity in that we are going to press to interact with, right? And we probably want the hit data as well. So probably .ok.map interact hit. And then we'll get a tuple out of that. It's not happy with me for some reason. Hits that are too far, we should never hit. So the way that we'll cull hits that are too far is by limiting the number of hits. So let's say like we can only hit 5 things, right? If there's 5 things between us and something, we can't hit a 6th thing. And then the other thing that we'll do is if you are what is it? We've got ray origin, direction, and time of impact. I think that's the distance, right? So we can do the vector distance calculation and decide if we want to continue or not. I guess take while would do that, right? Yeah. Yeah, find map, absolutely. You're right. In my brain, find was already find map, so this is for interact hit. So now this interact, right? We don't have any other information about it. So maybe we do tile texture index. I don't know that this is the right thing to do. If raycast bounce angle is facing the camera, then character image is visible before asset. I don't think we're going to use raycast to do that, but it's a cool idea. Press to interact. We've got mutable there. This could be mutable. Will this work? It's warning me for loop over an option. That is not what I want. If let sum. equals. And then we have interact. We're not doing anything with the interact. So let's make sure we debug it at least. We're only doing get. We're not doing get mute here. So we're not quite doing exactly what we want here, but so none of this is hitting, and then suddenly we hit this and we don't get anything. Is that because the tile texture index doesn't exist on the entity because it's a collider? Yes, I believe it does. Unwrap to get all the hits. We don't need all the hits. We already have all the hits. We don't need, I don't want all the hits, right? I want the hit for the box exclusively. So like if we are, see if I can line this up. I don't think I can. Yeah. It's interesting though. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we can go through the box and hit the fence, for example, right? But we don't need all of the hits because we already have all the hits. All of the hits are what we're iter sorting over. So this is all of the hits in this line. The only one we want is the closest one that we can press to interact with. Right? Find is literally what we want. We want just the one that is that box. Because we don't want that fence, right? Because it's not a press to interact. The crate here is the only press to interact. The ray will just keep shooting, which is fine. Get hit entity at this location with normal. So this is the distance, which is this calculation. So that would be how we would do, let's call this distance because that'll be more. So like if we wanted to, we could do distance dot, I think it's literally going to be distance dot distance. That's not what I was expecting, but I think we can just do vec2. So if we do vec2 0, right? Dot distance with our distance, which is now named terribly, right? You see why that's named terribly? This would be the distance to that ray, which we already have. Let's call this distance 2. And then we could filter on, I think that's a scalar. Yeah, that's the scalar. So this is the length of the vector. Whereas this is the, let's call this distance vec. And call this just distance, because that's what it is. And then interact is complaining for some reason. I don't know why. But if we were going to filter based on how far away it was, we would use that distance. So anything that's over, whatever, argument never used. If let some mute interact equals. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, never used in the, because I added the distance. Okay. At X, let's do distance. I like that you can put the labels in here, but I don't know that it's really what I want right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does it still think we're not using it? So let's get rid of this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So basically, we now know the entity, the vector distance, actually how far away it is, the normal that it bounces off of, which we don't care about. And interact is just the entity right now. So if we wanted to do anything with the crate, we would now have the opportunity to do it if you pushed the button, which would be the same action code that we wrote earlier. So let's leave that, I guess. This right here, this action just pressed interact. So we would have to query the player for the action state. We would want to get the action state off the player. We would want to test to see if the action state was pressed, which I think is not, that's not the right one. I'm in the wrong, there we go, here. Let me just get a third one there. Action state. So we have action state from the player. Raycaster is on the collider, so we do need this extra one. We have action state. Ray hits and query. Mute interact. Let's do this. Let's do if action state interact. Then we hit the entity. So now, this is going to constantly find that hit. If I don't close the window, this is going to constantly find that hit, right? So here, we go up to the box. I hit I, it prints out. I go up to the sensor, I hit I, nothing happens because the box is the only press to interact here. So now we have the button, we can click, we can detect the box. And at this point, it's basically fire the event for the press to interact, but I don't know what I want to do with the event. The distance calculation seems a bit weird. I would say the time of impact is the distance and the calculated distance vec is the world position of the hit. It's the local position of the hit though. It's the local position based off of the player position. So it's not world position, it's player local. So hit entity at 1212, right? So I'm very close to it right now. If I go all the way out here, these tiles are 128 pixels tall. So this should be 128 plus about 20 or 30. Yeah, so it's 162, which is 128 plus about 20 or 30. So it's a player local vector. The time of impact is from the player, but I don't actually know like what time scale that is. Like I truly don't know anything about the time scale here. Time of impact. Oh, hit that time of impact. So if we do hit that time of impact here, right? I'll throw this in an info instead of a debug. Trying to get in the better habit of using Bevy's logging instead of debugs. I actually don't know. All I know is that time of impact is t. I don't actually know what time scale or anything like that. So time of impact 103. So that actually is the distance. You're right. Interesting. Let's do it at an angle. If I can do it at an angle. There we go. Time of impact 143. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The time of impact is actually the distance. No, you keep saying my bad, but your suggestions are actually pretty good. So I don't mind them. You can also calculate the length of the raycast for only the nearest object. Yes, but we don't want the nearest object. We want the nearest interactable object, which is what we're doing. Right? Because this, so let's go over what we're doing here. Query press to interact is a query for anything that has the press to interact component on it. So these are colliders, any collider with press to interact on it. This query is the raycaster that is on our player model. So it is sitting on the collider entity, shooting out in the direction the player is facing. And then we query for the actual player, which is one level up from the collider. So this is actually querying for the collider. This is querying for any entity that has the press to interact component. And this is querying for the player's actions, right? So what we're doing here is making sure that we have a player. Otherwise, we can't do anything here because this is a press to interact kind of system. For the ray that we have and the hits that that ray is producing. So in this case, it's producing like 1 or 2. I don't know if it's actually hitting the collider it's on. But in this case, it's definitely hitting 2, right? It's hitting the crate and it's hitting the wall. So we have at least 2 hits here. We're iterating over them. This logic is a little convoluted. I'm probably going to change it. But the iter sorted sorts from closest to furthest. It's a little bit more expensive than doing just .iter, is what the docs say anyway. But I don't care about that right now. So we sort from closest to furthest, and I'm doing a find map for the first thing that we can find that is in the query press to interact. So anything that is an entity that has a component that is pressed to interact. If we find one, we turn that into an option and we map it into a tuple so that we keep the interact and the hit. Then what we're doing is we're just logging out a bunch of stuff because we don't really have anything to do to the chest right now. Like I don't have a second sprite to change to. We could change to an arbitrary second sprite. That would be worth, I guess. Let's see, query press to interact. Do we actually have a mutable thing here? This is on the collider, so we would have to find the parent. I don't know that I care enough. Sensors, how do we finding the parent here? We're doing query sensors, query alts. So we would do something like this. Bring this in here. We don't have an alternate state, so we're just going to query for tile texture index. I'm going to get rid of name because this is just a quick demo. I think these have background colors, so we could like flash a color instead, but query press to interact, query player, query this is query press to interact. Press to interact tiles, right? And then here we have the entity and the parent. So we do that. This is not mutable because we're not doing any mutable stuff. So we have the entity and the parent. When we have interact here, we can do, because this will always be true, .get mute interact .0, which I think is the entity of it, or .1, which is the parent. So let's say okay mute tile, else, I don't know, return, or maybe continue. I don't know. I'm just kind of doing it right now. And then tile dot zero, and let's do equals tile dot zero plus one. Why not? Interact dot one. I don't know. That might need to be a reference. Let's figure out what the compiler is saying. Hits is already sorted. Hits is not sorted by default. Hits is sorted because we've done the iter sorted. Entity found parent dot zero. Expected entity, so we can get that. Actually, it's not dot zero, it's dot get. I always forget what the function is on parent. Yeah, so hits is not sorted by default. We can sort it by using iter sorted. So theoretically, if we were going to do a bunch of stuff or whatever, hey, look, it's working. It gets to the end and stops, but that's the wrong place to put that logic. We need to put this logic here. I basically made Tears of the Kingdom physics. I don't know that that's true, but okay. So we get over here, like, so we're hitting, and I hit I, and it just changes. So every time I hit the button, we're just, you know, changing to a different tile. And you can just do this forever. So we can now press to interact with stuff. This is the wrong place for this system. It's also like, it's called print hits right now. So maybe I will take this and do this is not print hits. This is what enables press to interact via raycasting. And then I think that all three of these things, the sensors that we did, right? So let me get into the game here. So what did we do today, right? We did sensors for the floor. This should fire an event when you do this so that we can do things in the world when it happens. We did press to interact on a sensor, which is very cool because then you can stand in one spot and trigger something in another place. And then we've also got the raycasting going. So imagine that's still the crate. And whenever I hit the button, we can fire another event and, you know, make the chest open or, you know, do whatever. So overall, very happy with all of this. Very happy with, like, generally speaking, now there's 3 different kinds of ways we can interact with the world. And I just need to hook up the event system to make those, like, do things. So, like, this switch, what does this switch do? You know, does it open a door? At some point we'll need, like, if you open a chest, you need to get, like, an item out of it or something, you know? And at some point this switch, I think I'm going to switch the switch to raycasting as well, but I'm going to keep the sensor interaction because I think the sensor interaction is very cool and can be used for stuff. Because, like, imagine you're standing on a platform and you need to, like, interact with it to make something happen. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But I'm very happy with these 3 things for the day. So we did kind of switches, floor and wall, and then we did chests. And I guess next week we'll do stuff coming out of the chest or something like that. I'm probably going to clean up some of the code. And then maybe we'll do enemies next week. Maybe we'll do our first enemy or something. So interesting that the time to whatever for the ray is actually the distance. So we don't actually need to calculate the distance because we already have it. The time of impact. But that's very cool. I'm pretty happy with all this for today. I think that's going to be the end of the stream. We've been going for 4 hours now. So thanks for hanging out, everyone. This week in Bevy on Monday, maybe some other videos if I get to them, and then another stream on Saturday morning. There's the Discord if you want to be in it, and then yeah, I'll see you next week. Have a great rest of your day, y'all.